All right. Well, welcome back. Hello, hello.
Hello.
Thank you again for joining me. I just want to say I appreciate you having this again. I'm going to try to look more directly at the camera, so this also might be a little weird for you. It's like I keep on looking down because I want to watch both of us, but I'm like, oh wait, no, I got to look at my cell phone camera, which is weird. Um, but yeah, thank you for being here.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm happy to chat again as always. Yeah, had a great conversation last time and looking forward to some more good conversation.
Heck yes, heck yes. So last time, let's just do a quick recap of last time. We took some time and kind of went over your pathway into the science field, your high school education experience, your college years, your PhD route, and then kind of we touched upon before we parted uh, your current research and what you're currently involved in. So today I kind of want to spend a little more time talking about your research and kind of getting a little bit of understanding of what your typical day as a scientist looks like. So, with that being said, let's just jump right into that question of, remind us again what your current research is and just what a typical day kind of looks like.
Sure. Yeah, so what I will say is that depending on the time of year, a day in the life of a field biologist can look very different. So I'm sorry. Now let me back up. So just as a reminder, I am a wildlife biologist, and specifically, I specialize on the uh, ecology of bats. And so I'm a bat ecologist, and I've been studying wildlife since 2012, 2013 timeframe. And while most of that has been bats, I've also studied small mammals, other things, etc. But definitely centered on mammals. And so what I'm doing currently is I am a postdoctoral researcher, so I'm done with my PhD, and I am still going through the data and publishing the research out of my PhD work. That's a big part of what I'm doing right now. And my PhD research focused on migratory bat ecology. So the way that I've always wanted to frame the research that I do personally is that I like to have a conservation angle for what I am researching, what I am discovering, how can that be applied to help the species down the line for different conservation issues. So for migratory bats, that big conservation issue for them is unfortunately wind energy.
Hmm.
So a lot of migratory bat research goes into uh, how how bats are interacting with wind energy facilities. And so it's just a sad truth that migratory bat populations have been declining for practically 20, like pretty much since wind turbines started going up across the landscape, their populations have been going down because um, for some reason, one of the species we don't fully understand why right now, but there is more research that's going into it to find out like why. For some reason, the hoary bat, which is I think I kind of talked about this one last time. So the hoary bat is one of North America's largest bat species. They've got a wingspan about that long, and they are the number one bat that is killed at wind facilities. And for some reason, they are also seem to be attracted to wind energy facilities.
Huh.
And they're on their route for extinction. So there's been a lot of predictive models, and it could very well be that if big changes aren't made, they might be extinct as soon as 2050. Which, P.S. That's only
Hmm.
25 years from now. That's nothing. That's nothing.
Yes.
That's a blink of an eye. Uh, yeah. And so I am very fortunate where I have gotten to work with live hoary bats. So
Yeah.
the study site that I worked at for my PhD, the Cypress Hills, it's one of the only known locations where these bats go to have their pups in the summertime. And so I studied their ecology, their community ecology, so how they're interacting with their environment. I've studied their morphology, echolocation, and a little bit about their physiology as well. So going into like hormone profiles and hibernation. yeah, and so I've been working on publishing my personal results from the data, getting that out into the scientific world. And then I'm also building some more projects that hopefully are going to get off the ground next summer, which I'm super stoked about.
Interesting. So
Yeah.
I think that's a great. Again, when you talk, I think of all these questions that I want to ask because this is just how my brain works. So I think that's something that I had to learn as I was an undergrad is like when I felt like when you went for a PhD, you published on one thing and that's it. Like you only had one publication and that was your PhD. And I feel like more than I talk to people that are in research, your PhD can be several publications and you can
Oh
publish
yeah.
even before you have get your PhD. So do you want to talk a little bit about, further about how usually when you jump into that? Well, I'll just let you go. I'll stop
Sure.
talking. But yeah, like
Sure.
what's that PhD research look like?
Sure. Okay. So, coming out of I'll first say, coming out of my PhD work, I am getting, right now for sure, three publications. Two have already been published, and my third research article is currently submitted for publication. So, which that's like my personal brag is that a year out of my PhD, all three are either published or submitted. So I'm like,
Congratulations, that's awesome. That is amazing.
okay, so, but kind of backing it up is like, it was actually kind of ingrained in me that like when you're going into a research specific graduate program, because you can get a master's, a master's of arts in biology and not have a research thesis based program. And so you'll probably do some kind of literature review where you're combining a bunch of theses together to come up with new hypotheses. Or even if it's a master's of arts and science, it could be some sort of science communication program instead. But if you're doing a research based thesis, which is what I have always done, um, it's kind of, I would say it's almost like an agreed upon verbal contract with your supervisor that you will publish your research. If your research is informative and adds something new to the world, like it deserves to be published. It if it's you find out something small and it's not groundbreaking to the field, published in Science or Nature or something, National Geographic. There's tons of small journals. So, like, for example, I published a small paper on a really cool observation. It was just from one animal doing a really cool thing and wrote it up as a natural history note and got it published in a small natural history journal. It's small and it might not ever be like cited in research, but it's there in case it lends its information to something further down the line. So you can, what I even encourage undergrads, and I was encouraged as an undergrad, like, hey, if you do a project, maybe you can get published as an undergrad, which is a really cool thing to do. And
Oh,
whenever I first had one of my first undergraduate research assistants, we had a really awesome natural history observation, which was catching, and I'm not sure if this story came up last time, but me and my undergrad assistant, we captured a bat that had been banded in 1993.
oh
So that,
my.
yeah, the
Three?
bat,
Jeez.
I am pretty sure that the bat was older than my field assistant. I think he was 28 or maybe 29 at the time, but I think it was older than him. I can't remember what year he was born. He could just tell me. But yeah, and that's incredible information to have. Like longevity of bats is one of those things that you don't get a lot of records for. So when you capture a 29-year-old bat, you got to publish that, and so we did. And I made sure that I was like, Josh, his name is Josh. I was like, Josh, you are writing up this paper. I will help. I will help all along the way to get it nice and in shape, but this is going to be your project and you're going to get published as an undergrad. And sure enough, we got it all done. It's published now, and he got his
Oh, that's
first paper
awesome.
as an undergrad too.
That's
Yeah.
I when I was working with some undergrad stuff like universities, I feel like more and more that I hear from them, the more they're pushing, like you're saying, undergrads to do to jump in with research. And like you said, even if they don't publish, even just conducting more research, activities, labs, whatever it is. I feel like a lot of universities, and I think that's for the betterment of science. It's getting
Yeah.
kids involved in that research. But
Yeah,
yeah, that's
absolutely.
awesome.
Absolutely. And I just think it's really, it just, whenever I was first encouraged and kind of was going down the path of like research in my undergrad, it was just one of those things that was like, oh, wow, like I can do this. Like I can do this. I can start this project from start to finish and actually see it published on paper. It's just neat. It's just neat.
Oh yeah.
Um, yeah, but I mean, if you want to go all the way like to how to like go into study design to implementation, we can do that. Like
Well, yeah.
we
Let's
can keep
let's
that all rolling.
let's jump into that a little bit since we're on the topic. So like when you were trying to figure out with your collaborating professor, what dynamics does that look like? How do you figure out what question? Obviously, it's going to be something that they're probably have some expertise in. But what does that look like whenever you're choosing something to research and something to study?
Yeah. Um a big
Tough
so
question, right?
because it's always like where did it start, like where does it all start, like I think probably one of the hardest things to do is just start a project, which it all comes back down to what's your question. What do you want to
Mhm.
know? What's the question? What do you want to know? And whenever I started my PhD program, the things that I did know. I knew where I was going to do the research, the species that I could potentially work on. That being said, I'm pretty sure that if I told my supervisor, Dr. Mark Brigham, that rather than studying bats, I wanted to study this really small population of pine martens and what's in their poo, I'm sure he would have said yes. Like he was kind of a, sure, go for it. uh, but for me, it was the bats, right? And something about going back to thinking about migratory bats, they're kind of both really exciting to study, but also make me want to slam my head against a wall because there's not a lot known about them. And when you're writing proposals and when you're writing grant applications, because writing, I cannot stress enough. I'm going to like pause for a second. I cannot stress enough how much reading and writing you will do as a research academic or as an academic period. So much reading, so much writing. But like something like I said last time, it's amazing how much easier those things become when you're actually interested in the subjects. It gets
Yep.
easier. And with practice, it gets easier. Um, so I had kind of my foundation. I knew what I was going to be working with. And so before even could really get to the questions, I had to do the reading. And and eventually you get to a point where it's like, well, hey, but what about this? And what about this? And what about that? It's like, oh, we don't know. We don't know. We don't know. Okay, that's gaps in the knowledge. And you can use those gaps in the knowledge to try and see if you can form a question out of the commonalities, out of those gaps, and start forming questions. If we don't know much about how in this case, I was pretty hyper focused on the silver-haired bat. My project did change. It changed a lot for many reasons. I think we kind of went into that.
Hmm.
It changed a lot, but it all started from reading as much as I could about silver-haired bats, finding out what we did and did not know. And what we didn't know was a lot about their social behavior, their community and population genetics. There's a lot more info out now because that was, years ago and people build. There wasn't a lot about roosting ecology and species interactions. And I was like, okay, well, that all sounds like there's some pretty big knowledge gaps in the summer ecology of silver-haired bats. And so I can start building up some questions. How many or how do silver-haired bats behave in the summer and how do they move across the landscape. And I also had some questions regarding their migration strategies. And a big one for me was how do they determine this is how basic it can get. Not basic, but how do they determine which way to go? How do bats know which way to go? How do they
Mm-hmm.
know? And so I started asking, okay, well, how do bats, or even before that, I'm sorry, can can the silver-haired bat determine directionality? Do they know which way they're going? And yeah, kind of combine those all together, and you can get a couple of different chapters on the roosting, foraging, and migratory behaviors of silver-haired bats. And then you got to get into the field and actually catch yourself some bats. And so this is where the fun, well, I mean, it's all fun, but the big fun starts happening when you can get out into the field, throw up your bat nets, start catching bats, put on some radio transmitters onto those suckers, start doing radio telemetry off across like crazy landscapes. I mean, field work's where it's at. Like that's what really sold me, was being able to do field work.
Do you so to just one thing I loved about your response, you started talking about how you kept on reading and reading and you would ask questions and either you would find the answer and you would find those gaps and then you would use those gaps as almost like arenas for the questions. I think that's a really cool way of looking at it. I've never really looked at research questioning like that. I think that's just a really interesting way of looking at it. I love that.
Yeah. I mean, of course, everyone's going to come at their questions in different ways, but looking for what we don't know is a pretty fun and exciting way to do it.
Oh, I love that. You talked about your field work. So, what these migratory bats, do they come out during the day? Do they come out during the night? Is there like certain time periods where you do most of your research, not say your research, but most of your work?
Okay. So, if you recall from our last conversation, I stressed the importance of work-life balance.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So, I am going to eat my words a little bit here. And that is because when it comes to, and this is how I function and how I think about the work that I do. And what, unfortunately, wildlife, it does not care. It does not care about your 9 to 5. It doesn't care about your 8 hours of sleep. It doesn't care. And with bats, especially bats in northern latitudes, they are only present at the field site. They probably get there late May to early June, and they're gone by the second or third week of August.
Oh, wow.
And so you're talking about a very short time frame where you have to collect all of your data, all of your samples. Not only that, but bats are absolutely not active. North American bats, absolutely not active during the daytime. They are nocturnal
Mm-hmm.
species. Another way that they separate from birds readily migrate at night. They actually, many bird species will migrate through the day and actually forego resting, sleeping, or stopping over somewhere and just continue migrating through the night so that they can reach their destinations. Bats do not do that. They are only active at night. You might see them like early morning or maybe close to the evening. You might see some bat activity, but for all
Mm-hmm.
intents and purposes, nocturnal. So you have to be nocturnal. You gotta be if you want to study the bats. You gotta be up when the bats are up. Um, if you are tracking bats, so if you're actually trying to find them at their day roosts, well, that means you're also going to have to be a little bit up in the daytime too. So again, I'm eating my words when it comes to work-life balance because my exception is the field season. The field season is when you go hard. You go long, you go hard, you do what you need to do in order to find out as much as you can and collect as much information as you can about the animals. At the same time, I still sort of consider it balanced because I also really enjoy doing the work.
Yep.
So you telling me I got to spend like 12 hours, 12 to 15 hours a day catching and trapping bats and putting radio transmitter on them and tracking them to their roosts? Like, oh no. Oh. Now it is and can be solid type 2 fun. Do you know the different types of fun?
Me? No.
Okay, this is how I always refer to it. Field season is the best example of type 2 fun. Type 1 is fun while it's happening and it's fun to look back on. Type 2 fun, not necessarily fun while it's happening, but man, you would go back and you would do it again and again and again. You wouldn't change a
Yep.
thing. Type 3 fun is just not fun. It's just not fun.
I like that category. I like. Did you get that from somebody, or did you make that yourself?
I don't know. I did not come up with it, but it's something that I inherited along the line of life. I don't know where I got it from. No
I
idea.
like that. I'm gonna steal that. I'm sorry. I'm stealing that.
It's
I
yours.
like
Take
that.
it.
I like that. I
Yeah.
I agree with the field work though. With sometimes, especially with paleo work, like if I'm working on like a dinosaur site where we're just removing overburden, like during it, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is tough work. But I look back, I'm like, oh, that was a lot of fun. So that I agree with. The field work that I
Yeah.
have experienced is also type 2 work
Yep.
sometimes.
Yeah. Like I cannot stress enough, like not everyone will take to field work. Not everyone will take to it. Not everyone will like doing field work because it is very, very, very physically demanding. And depending on the job, you could be living in very remote locations. So, like during all of my work, I've been living in very remote locations. I like that. Not everyone does. And I really like physical work. And so field work for me is just really like even I could be sweating buckets and just be miserable, but at the same time, I wouldn't change a thing. Wouldn't change it.
Mhm. Yep.
But it's really not for everyone. It's very physically and mentally demanding. And depending on the living situation, even on your off time, you're not like at home relaxing. You're at some random biology field station in the middle of nowhere. So your free time is still, you know, has an asterisk next to it.
Yeah. It's I think that's something that I'm glad I warmed up to through my paleo work is like you said, your off days. Like I mean you're living in tents, it's still 100 and some degrees out. Like it's a day off, but it's really not a day off because
Yeah.
it's still tough environments.
Yeah. But some of I will also say, field work is also where some of my strongest friendships have been forged. Man, when you do field work together, you can do anything together. And that's why, like, having a really good field crew is so critical. You just got to make sure that everyone's gonna like click and vibe really well, which is tricky, which can be a tricky thing when you're putting field crews together. Yeah.
That's something. Yeah, I can't. I hate to keep on saying like, oh yes, 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 but yes, everything you're saying is so true. I mean, especially, I mean, you're in a stressed environment. You're not, usually you're like you're saying you're at a field station, having people that you can trust, rely on, and not even just that, but like vibe with.
Yeah.
I think that's the most important part. It's tough sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah, but it's my bread and butter. I love it.
What does capturing, you talked about the bat nets, what does capturing bats look like typically with like what kind of devices, what does that experience look like?
Yeah, so netting bats is very akin. So what I am about to describe is going to be very similar to also how you would go about catching birds. It's just at night rather than during the day. Um, the way that you place the nets is different or can be different. So, I mean, I wish it was more complicated than what it is. But really, it's putting up very tall nets, very finely woven nets. So they're microfiber, microfilament. nets or whatever. And so whenever they're stretched out, they're very, very thin and hard to see. So the idea is that, you just kind of trick the bats into getting into the net. Um, there's different size. So I guess like I'm like tripping over my words now. Okay. We have different types of pole sets. You can have a single, double, or triple high pole set. And each one of those is probably going to be about 3 or 4 meters in length. And each one of those tiers is going to have its own net. So you have either 1, 2, or 3 nets. And those nets can range in length from 3 meters across to 18 meters across. So you could have a very, very long net. But the longer they are, they have just like, not issues. That's not really the right word, but an 18-meter net is going to catch the wind and billow a lot worse than a 6-meter net, for example. So those are things to consider when you're deciding on the length of net. And so it all kind of depends on the habitat, and the species that you want to capture will decide where and how high your net is going to be. So there's some bats that are more clutter adapted. So they're going to be deeper into the forest interior or along more cluttered corridors. And those corridors can be creeks, rivers, ATV trails, roads. Other species are more open space adapted. So the hoary bat is an open space adapted species. And so you're more likely to get a hoary bat if you put a long, tall net directly perpendicular to a forested edge area so that you're kind of like going out into a field, hoping that as the hoary bat is flying by this edge area that it gets into the net. But then you have where I did my PhD work, the Cypress Hills, which it's nowhere else. I think maybe we even talked about nowhere else has been like the Cypress Hills. I'm kind of obsessed with the area, slightly, a lot, where all of the bats, except for oh my God, I'm sorry, I'm getting so tangential. Okay. Almost all the bat species use this creek corridor called the Battle Creek, and they use it almost like a little highway, except for one of North America's most common bats, which does occur in the area, but for some reason, I think I've caught 6 there over the last 4 or 5 years. When you can, like, they're the big brown bat. They are practically the most common bat species in all of North America, but it's rare for me. But the hoary bats and the endangered little brown bats and silver-haired bats, we're getting those in abundance, and that's just all right there along the creek.
How many when you set up these bat nets for like a night? How many bats do you usually catch on like one night? Is it like your tons? Is it little? Is it like a rare sighting?
That very much depends on where you are and the time of year. If you're talking about early June and it's still kind of cold out in where I am, at least, you might get 1 or 2. If you had 3 early June, that'd be like, wow, it was a good night. We got 3 and it was cold out. Later in the year, it's like later in the summer, I should just say, like second week of July, especially when all of the baby bats, all of the pups are out flying, you're definitely going to get more. So for me at my field site, it could range from, we would get skunked. Skunked is when you get nothing. That's what you call it. You'd get nothing maybe a few times throughout the summer, but usually it ranges from 1 to 15 bats, depending. However, there are different types of traps. And so I've also worked in an area where in a net, we did get probably 30 bats in the net at once, that was nerve-wracking. We only had 3 people getting bats out of the net, and it can take a while. They get quite tangled. And so that was a crazy night.
I'm sure you don't want to hurt the bats and have them freak out in the net. Yeah.
Right? That's the most important thing, is maintaining the safety of the animal is always number 1 priority. There have been so many times where it's like, if I felt like, or the bat or animal was giving signs of stress, I'm like, no, we're cutting this net. We're getting this bat out. We're not even taking data. Let the bat go. That's more important. That's what I stand by.
That's awesome.
Um, there's a thing called a harp trap. And a harp
Hmm.
trap, it's kind of like two bars, like if these are bars and there's fishing wire that is weaved through these bars. And so it kind of creates this, the bats have to fly through the fishing wire, but they get caught and then tumble down into a bag.
Hmm.
If you put a harp trap outside of a known maternity colony, you can get
Oh my.
hundreds of bats. And so when I was an undergrad, I was helping out on a project that was studying endangered gray bats. And we were just going out and doing some monitoring. And it just so happened that there was a maternity colony living in the sewer system of this small town in Missouri. And so we just put the harp trap up. Hundreds. We couldn't do them all. We could not process all these bats. I was literally like scooping up bats and just letting them go because we didn't have the manpower to take all of the data for all of them.
Hmm.
Yeah, so it depends. If you're out on a foraging area, it is fewer. If you are setting nets or harp traps right outside of a colony or a cave, then you're going to get a heck of a lot more. Yeah, so it depends. It depends on where you are and the time of year.
Do you ever, and this is again, this question is meant in all good faith. Do you ever get like biases in data because of the um, collection methods? Like I just think in my in paleo stuff, like field work, like it's if I have a really good eye for like just say like gar scales or for fish bones, but I don't have a good eye for mammal teeth, then my collection is biased because I'm only looking for a certain type. Even though I'm not
Hmm.
trying to be, it's just I'm not good at identifying mammal teeth. Is there any biases that you've seen that you've had to account for, or that you try to mitigate through that kind of research?
Absolutely.
Hmm.
Absolutely there is. I'm trying to think of some like good examples in bat research specific. This it kind of goes into also that's why it's important to repeat things in other areas. So, like there's so many different papers and publications out there about the roosting ecology of endangered Indiana bats. But
Hmm.
if all you've ever done is study the roosting ecology of Indiana bats in Indiana, if you're studying the roosting ecology of Indiana bats in Indiana, Illinois, Missouri, Tennessee, and they're all saying kind of relatively the same thing, then you can say something pretty generally about the species. But if it's just a phenomenon for that one place, then it's probably just that one place.
Hmm.
Uh, by where I see some sampling biases, actually, especially with bat research, is that there's a lot of emphasis put on the females of the species, which arguably biologically there is more. I don't mean this as a social statement. There is biologically, there's more importance placed onto the females because they are adding to the reproductive population.
Hmm.
One female is biologically more has more value. That is, I don't
I,
know, a horrible way to put that.
I totally understand. It's a bio people. You're good.
Right. And so most conservation efforts for bats is kind of centered around the females.
Hmm.
However, that does leave out kind of this big gap of knowledge of what males are doing because at the end of the day, like male behavior and male ecology is going to be equally as it is going to be very very critical for the survival of a species. And male and female bats do very different things during the
Yeah.
summertime. So during the winter, yes, like bats will form pretty big colonies in caves and all be doing relatively the same thing at the same time, hibernating. But in the summertime, females are going off and forming maternity colonies, having their pups, etc. But the males go off and form these big bachelor colonies, all off on their own, doing their whole own thing. And it's like not much research has gone into what exactly male bats of many different species, what they are doing. Um,
Interesting.
which Like I'm like, that's a pretty big knowledge gap in bat research. Like that's a pretty big bias, I think. Like I understand the sentiment behind it, but it's still a pretty big gap.
I think that the focus on female. I mean, it's totally understandable because most, like you said, most of these species are either endangered or endangered of going extinct. I mean, when you're in a critical time frame, like you said, of 25 years, I mean, there has to be a focus of how do we properly save these species, and like you
Yeah.
said, that's probably more on the focus of the females. But that's very interesting that there's. I never knew that those behaviors were that different between. I mean, obviously you see it in other species, but I didn't realize they were that different with the males and females. That's really interesting.
Yeah, yeah, there's actually it is pretty incredible how differently male and female bats do behave seasonally because
Mm-hmm.
it has totally different implications energetically and totally different implications physiologically as well.
Sorry, I
Um,
was just trying to catch up on those words. That's a really and like so like how they use their resources, how they use their
yeah,
energy. Okay.
yeah. So, okay, so thinking about it again, going back to migratory bats, which there are
Hmm.
far fewer migratory bats, but that's just where my mind goes. Um, So a male migratory bat in the summertime might just go off and form bachelor colonies, but they're also starting to find that some male hoary bats are doing these massive transcontinental movements, and we don't know why. And we don't know for what reason either. Like it's not the reproductive season, so why are they moving thousands of kilometers within a few weeks? Like why would they do that? Meanwhile, you have like female hoary bats, which energetically for them, they have to in the springtime they're pregnant. They become pregnant in the fall. I'm sorry, they become inseminated with sperm in the fall, and they delay pregnancy and become pregnant in the spring. So they have a baby, they have a fetus, and a pup and a baby down the line that they're going to be taking care of. So they have to be have the energy to feed their fetus, migrate to northern latitudes, and stopping and refueling along the way, only at night, only at night, and then during the summer be ready to give birth, start producing milk, and then fledge their pups, all within like roughly a 3 to 4 week period. So those are just dramatically different energetic costs that are pressuring the species differently. So, like, what affects one may not necessarily affect the other.
Interesting.
Yeah.
That's I I love hearing when like just these things that I don't know. I'm just like life is so freaking cool. Like
I
I don't know
know, right?
how evolution has it just blows my mind. um
Yeah, and bats are one of the best, like because there's 1,500 now, 1,500 different species of bats. That is 1,500 different evolutionary pathways, and all different behaviors, different shapes, different sizes. It just gets me so jazzed up when I think about it.
oh yeah. How many typically in these migratory bats? How many pups does a female usually have per pregnancy?
For migratory bats, they will usually have twins, and yeah, so most migratory bats will have twins. Non-migratory bats usually only have one little pup every year, and the leading hypothesis for that is that migratory behavior is frankly risky. Why do birds have so many offspring? Well, it's because a lot don't make it. And so for migratory bats, it's kind of the same thinking. They have more pups because a lot of them aren't going to make it.
Wow, you're blowing my mind right now. My brain's having to take all this information. I'm like, I have to readjust how I think about things. That's interesting. So again, this is just how my brain thinks. Is I just want to ask more questions. Do we see is twins the default? I'm gonna say setting, but default adaptation for all these migratory bats, or is it just like is it having multiple, or is it specifically twins?
No, actually, you do see some variety. So twins are the norm, but you can still have, of course, like a silver-haired bat having just one, or a hoary bat having one. Twins are the norm, but then you can have an eastern red bat, which is another migratory species. Sometimes they will have quadruplets. It's it's I don't want to say it's common, but it's also not insanely rare. Like you do see it. Um, yeah, and so that yeah, you can have some that have four pups, which is just crazy to me. Especially because those moms they fly with their pups, and
Hmm.
you don't get it very often. You don't see it out very often. But where you can get an image of a mom bat flying, and she's actively also nursing a pup. It's just crazy.
Moms for the win, right?
They
Jeez.
are incredible. They are incredible moms.
What was something? So you're talking. So again, on field work, um, what's your experience? Like, what was your experience learning what field work was like? Because again, I think that's something that college students, whether they are undergrads, graduates, or jumping into a field maybe where they're unsure of, into a PhD field. Um, what was that kind of learning like? Was it a lot of you know throw you in and figure it out on the way, or did they kind of prep you a little bit beforehand? What was that experience learning what field work was like?
So, I think again something that I mentioned in our last conversation was that like I did take advantage of a lot of undergraduate opportunities, including like the research side of things. So I joined a couple of labs. I was in a salamander behavioral ecology
That's right.
and the bat ecology labs, and being a part of that, I think is really what it supplied or built a foundation that I had a much easier time, I think, going through and designing my first personal projects with my master's and my PhD work, because I had that exposure, especially in the salamander behavioral ecology lab. I was advised. I was mentored. I was mentored by her name's Dr. Alicia Mathis, and she's out of Missouri State.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, she was just such an incredible mentor and really helped students understand the importance of asking a question and study design. And a lot of her work, like, yeah, we would go out and we would catch salamanders, but the work was done in a lab setting. And when you're designing thinking about study design, designing a project to answer your question, I feel like, is a really creative time, because when you're thinking about how can I answer this question, you can think about, okay, what sort of supplies do I need to answer that question? What is going to be like what kind of data do I need to collect for answering that question? And I got all of that. I got all of that out of my undergrad. And so I took that knowledge and I did independent research as an undergrad, and I did small projects here and there. And so I got a lot of the exposure. So when it came to my master's program, I kind of was able to hit the ground running. I'd be like, okay, I kind of have a good foundation of the ins and outs of study design, what to think about. Um, and yeah, applied all of those skills again, and the skills don't go away. It's like once you learn the process of what goes into the scientific method, frankly, like it's the
Mm-hmm.
whole scientific method, right?
Mm-hmm.
um Once you can actually apply that to your question and problem in front of you, it just kind of comes naturally. It just kind of comes innately. And especially as you become more familiar with the language, with um, what is possible with scientific questioning. Yeah, it just kind of, I feel like I'm saying a lot now too. So sorry about that.
No, you're
Yeah.
good. I
Yeah. So
I
it's built and built based off of a foundation of having like a really great undergraduate education. Yeah.
I always remind students when they're looking at going for an undergrad. it's about the university, and obviously there's a lot of factors that go into it, but it's also having a, thinking that you're at least going to have a good relationship with some of the professors there and some of the classes.
Yeah.
Getting that experience in the lab is so crucial, and that's something that I feel like my university, I think, did a great job of exposing me. But now that I do more paleo work, I wish I would have gotten any paleo work in undergrad, just because that would have prepped me so much more for my my later experience and stuff in Montana. Yeah, it's something I think they are pushing more, which I'm glad to see. But I'm hoping students, when they hear this, they're like, okay, I'll take a shot at this lab, or I'll take a chance at doing this experience, because I think it's going to help them in the long run.
Yeah, and I'm just here to reinforce that. It was doing exactly that in my undergrad that kind of made a world of difference, because especially, and this is just kind of a commentary on who I had as mentors in my undergrad. Having an incredible mentor makes all of the difference. And I have had many across my career, so I'm very fortunate in that sense. And Alicia Mathis in particular, what she was always just so great at, and this has nothing to do with questions or methods or science-y things. It has everything to do with maintaining the wonder. Dr. Mathis was always so excited about what she was researching, about what her students were researching, about what we were finding out, about publishing, because like, you're the first person to know this thing, like that's so exciting, you should let everybody know. She's the one that instilled that. And maintaining that childlike wonder of discovery and curiosity, and how, like, yeah, we're doing complicated statistics, but it is through that math that you can find out something so extraordinarily cool about the natural world that no one has known before. And so it kind of just, you have to have the drive to learn, but also be sure to maintain the love and the joy of what you're doing, because both are in my opinion equally important, to thriving in a career like wildlife biology.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So 1 hour. So I'm looking at my time here. We're closing in on an hour. I always feel like this goes quicker than it actually. I'm like, oh, we still have like a half an hour left. I'm like, oh my gosh, we're already at 50 minutes. So one of the things you were just talking about, and I don't want to, how should I say? I don't want to speak for you, but one of the things that I struggled with when I was in college was the math. And I think that's part of the reason that I didn't go for a PhD, is because I was terrified that I was going to be in over my head with the math. And I think a lot of students are in that same boat of, math is difficult, I'm not even going to think about a PhD because of the math. Can you maybe talk about your experiences being in the PhD field, being in a science field, and just working within the math sphere, and how does that look like? And I don't want to say calm the outlook of students that are watching this, but just talk about that.
Yeah. There will be math. Hard stop. There's math. I'm sorry. It is what it is. It is what it is. And I will also say, I've actually tried to stop myself from saying I'm not good at math, and just check my own language, because if there's anything that I know for myself now, is that, frankly, if I put my mind to something, I'll make it happen. Mm-hmm. And so I tried to change my language, and rather than saying I'm not good at math, it's I don't have the patience for most math. I don't have the patience for it. I did not do well in my math courses. In my undergrad, I had to drop out of my trig class because I was not doing well. And I stepped back, and I did it again later. And I did better later. I went to tutors. I went to teacher tutors. I went to student tutors. I put the time, energy, and effort in to do well in those classes that I knew I was struggling in. I did what I had to do. I still didn't do great. I think I made out with a C, but you know what? That's fine. I'm fine with that.
Yep.
In my physics class, which is nothing but applied math, same thing. For physics, I went to tutors, I went to study sessions, and I did as much extra credit work because my teacher did provide extra credit, and I made sure to do all of the extra credit work. And I got 1 point, 1 percentage point that I needed for an A in that class. Like, did
Mm.
I really deserve the A? No, but I did my extra credit. So I got it.
Yep.
So I got it. Um, Statistics have always been difficult, and I have had to do a lot of statistics courses. So, like, after my undergrad, it mostly became statistics because that's what we do to understand the natural world. You collect data, you compare the data using statistics. I have taken probably 3 or 4 biology-esque statistics classes at this point. And am I fantastic? Absolutely not. No. But I do have a foundation of theory,
Mm-hmm.
and I do know how to do what my work requires of me. But if I need help, I go to tutors. But now what my tutors look like are I'll go knock on one of my colleagues' doors who is a whiz at statistical analysis, and I'll be like, "Will you help me with this problem? I don't know what I'm doing." Or I will do additional classes online and I will try and teach myself. There's so many free resources out there now, so if you need some assistance, it's like it's so available. It's so available
Mm-hmm.
to be able to kind of help yourself in that sense. And I also do collaborations. If there's a type of, like, for example, there is this type of diet, this analysis that I was doing on bat diet, and I was not proficient at it, but one of my collaborators was. And so together, through collaboration, we are publishing a paper together. And that's one of the things that I like. I love collaboration because I'm not the smartest one in the room. I am not. I'm just not. That person over there can help me answer my question. Let's work together and help answer these questions together. I get a publication out of it. You get a publication out of it. The world now has new information. Like, who cares if I'm not the one that did every single part of the fancy statistics? It's not about claiming the glory. It's about answering questions and doing it together. I feel better about the work that I do if I do it with community. And I think I talked about community the last time that we chatted too. And that's kind of how I view my work is I like working with collaborators. I like working with multiple researchers where we can come together and help answer difficult questions. I'm an expert in some things. They're experts in other things. Let's do this together. Yeah,
I,
anyway,
I,
and
I'm,
soapbox.
I'm trying to like hold myself back because I'm like, I'm just like, you are speaking what I like everything that I feel when I was a teacher. The 2 main things I want to just focus on with your response. I love that you talked about, again, for any students that are watching this, I feel like, again, when I was in undergrad, I looked at people who had their PhD or were going for their PhD, and I was like, they're the smartest people in the world. They know every single math thing, and I'm nowhere going to. And it's like, no, like PhDs, they're not perfect at everything. Like you said, you have expertise that are so fine, but then whenever you don't have, when you have something maybe you struggle with, you go and you collaborate. And that's that second point I want to hit is there is so much collaboration within science where
Mm-hmm.
if you do feel like you have a weakness somewhere, that's when you, like you said, you reach out to your faculty, you reach out to even some friends and say, hey, I'm having trouble here, can we collaborate with this together? I think it's something that is need to be focused on more in high schools and in college, where it's, you know, it's working with other people. When I was in college, I always said I wasn't the smartest person, but I can work with anybody. I can tell me what to do and I'll figure it out. But like I'm not the smartest person. So those
Yeah.
2 things that you just hit upon are just like, I don't know if you saw. I was like trying to hold myself back. I'm like, just let her talk, because she's doing such a great job of explaining this. Ah, I love it. I love when a non-teacher like myself, or you know what I mean, a non-high school teacher that is saying the things that our high school teachers are saying.
Yeah,
Oh,
and what I will admit is that not every like this is me, and this is the way that I like to work.
Hmm.
There is still a whole side of academia where it is kind of this hyper competitive solo race to the end.
Yep.
And like I have had moments where I had to choose to kind of go one route or go another. And like for example, I know we're almost out of time, but for example, I had an opportunity to go to a premier US university, UC Davis, for my PhD work. And I was like, that's an incredible opportunity. And then I also had the opportunity to go to the University of Regina here in Saskatchewan. Obviously, we know where this ended. I called up, or like, yeah, I chatted with, maybe had a Zoom conversation with some of the grad students at UC Davis, and they were like, it's really individualistic. There's not a lot of community, and people kind of keep to themselves. And I'm like, that's as much as I love the project that I had an opportunity to work on, the person, the supervisor I had to work with, I was like, I I won't do well. I will not do well in that environment. I am
Hmm.
a squishy human being that likes community and not being cutthroat, not being hyper competitive. I would rather build relationships than build uh, I don't know, a repertoire of things. Like that's
Yes,
me. So I am not like I'm not all researchers. I'm just one side of it.
I like hearing this side though because I think more people. Again, this is something that I had to realize when working within academia. That there was this really cool and more community based side, and I really enjoy this
Mhm.
side more than because I am not as yeah.
Me
So my
too.
last question, I do want to ask one more question, even though we are butting against time. Who cares? I don't got anything to do tonight. So my question, again, my goal for these pathway series is to help students kind of just prepare and think about science as a different, field choice, career choice. What is something that you wish you knew, going into high school, or what's something you would recommend to a high school student to either take part of, some classes to take, something to just think differently about? What would be a good thing to tell a high school student? I'm kind of droning on to give you a little more time because that's a really tough question to answer
Yeah.
here. So
I mean, opportunities wise, first I will say that something that I wish I had known in high school was just how broad different fields of the sciences can be, or of whatever they are interested in. If they're not interested in going into the sciences, then there's also different fields of literature focuses. There's there's so many different pathway there's so many different pathways that that was not planned. That are possible. So like just within my field of wildlife biology, there's so many different things that you can do within this field. And even people like so I mean like I don't have a disability that prohibits me from doing field work. Like maybe for some people this would stop them. It didn't stop me. But even for people who are disabled, let's say you are incapable of doing something like field work. That doesn't mean you can't be a wildlife biologist or an environmental biologist. If you're good with numbers and if you're good with pattern recognition, then you might be able to carve out your section in this field by being a data analyst, an environmental mapping analyst. There's so many different things that people can do. So even if there are things where you can't picture yourself in that field because of one reason or another, but you really would love to be able to, there might be a path. And it might take a little of like turning over some rocks and cover boards to find it, but if it's what you want to do, there is probably a path forward for you. And it can just look different. It can just look different from my path or other people's pathways. I'm sticking with this theme now. Uh,
it's like I'm setting you up for a slam dunk. This is just
oh,
perfect.
and we talked about this last time too. If you're unsure of what direction you want to go and you want to start thinking about different opportunities, maybe consider taking advantage of something like community college rather than hopping right into a 4-year university where you're kind of locked in to a little bit more of a degree. I am really like, even though it does extend your education maybe a little bit, um, I'm a big proponent of doing community college. I think that it's a great way to not only see what the college experience is like, but it also gets you introduced to different material and different viewpoints, saves you money, and a lot of community colleges also have lots of programs that you can get involved with or start volunteering with or get hired, to help inform you even more to what you would want to do for a degree further down the line. So I'm not saying do it, but consider community college as a way of figuring out what you want to do and saving a little bit of money in the process.
That's
And
yeah, go
like
ahead. Sorry.
that's a huge one for me. That's a huge one for me is community college. I think it's great. And
Yeah.
that there really are just so many different types of fields and opportunities out there, that can get so weirdly specialized. It might take 5, 10 years to get to that weird level of specialization, but like I study I study bats for a living now. Like all of that came out of doing introductory biology. So you have to go through the steps in order to get to the very weird niche studies. Yeah.
I think that's a great wrap up there. I just again want to thank you for your time. This has been it's taken us 2 hours to get through mostly everything, but I just want to again thank you for just taking your time, and I know this can be different because you're basically unraveling your life for somebody. So I again just want to thank you so much.
Yeah, hopefully it's coherent. Uh, hopefully it's coherent, and thank you for having me on. I like to share my story because I mean, bringing it back again to our previous conversation, I'm someone who didn't know for sure that they would pass high school. And so to be in a position now where I have a PhD and I am arguably pretty darn successful in my field, um, never saw this coming. So you just gotta stick with it. Yeah.